Unhand me, old man. You're in no position to demand anything. Better get out while you still can.
Damn you, Spawn. What in hell do you think you're doing?
Doing? Isn't it obvious? I podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Spawnography Hellspawn. I'm one of your co-hosts, Pierce Slyden. Pronouns they, them. Here with, as always,
George Marston, pronouns they, them, or she, her.
And we're getting into another couple of issues of Spawn. We're still in the middle of this Devil Inside arc, which is like 10 to 12 issues, 10, 11 issues long. You'd think at this point that I would actually count how many it is so that it would seem like I know what I'm talking about, but I haven't yet. So I'm just going to still be vague about it. But before we start, George, how are you?
You know, doing pretty good. Today, me and my roommate, who's my buddy, my best friend, we went to the practice space and worked on some music for our new band. We're working on some vocals for that. Kind of new, loud, hot punk band coming in at you soon. More details later. Sweet. And I saw Captain America. We can talk about that in a minute. How about you?
I saw Cap on Thursday.
Yeah, I saw Thursday as well.
And it's President's Day as we're recording this. But yeah, I saw Cap. I hated it, and my weekend was good. I played some Magic the Gathering, and today they announced the Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering cards. So I'm excited about some of them. So I'm excited about that. But neat. Yeah, Captain America. I've spent a lot of the weekend with people being like, Captain America, huh? And I'm like, no.
I thought it was perfectly mid. The thing is, I knew going in that it had reshoots like up to like the last couple weeks. And also the trailers went from looking real hot a while ago to looking real cold recently. And like, I went in kind of expecting it to be as mid as it gets. And to me, that's really, it's just an extremely forgettable MCU movie. Had a couple of interesting things, but for me personally, I guess I'd put it on the level of The Incredible Hulk. If you like The Incredible Hulk at all, you may get something out of it. If you don't like The Incredible Hulk at all, well, maybe you hated it, and I can't blame you for that because it had a lot of seams showing.
A crazy thing about it is, and I was saying this to Vanessa because she has no interest in seeing this film. She's
of course
like, I will not watch that, and I am better for it. And I told her that that's true because we're both pretty big Marvel fans, you and I. And I have been a midnight Marvel fan, Midnight Warrior, showing up when we actually used to do real midnight movies. Right. Back in my day. Yeah. That's the walking to school uphill both ways in the snow of millennials.
Had to be in line to see a movie because they didn't have assigned seats.
No assigned seats, and you had to show up early enough for your midnight movie so you didn't get the shitty seats. Times have changed for the better in some ways. I love being able to see a movie on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Anyway, I just was like, if you were 7 years old when Incredible Hulk came out, you've graduated college by now.
Yeah,
and you weren't waiting for this though. Like you weren't like, man, I really hope to pay off a bunch of shit from that movie that I saw. Well, whatever, man. 7.
I'm fucking 41 years old, and I was like, I can't wait to see The Leader. That's going to be cool. I've been waiting for that since The Incredible Hulk. I'm one of those suckers who doesn't hate The Incredible Hulk. I just think it's incredibly mid.
I think it's okay. I think it's a better movie than this one.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, it doesn't have the weight of like being chopped and screwed by Marvel.
Weird politics.
Well, that's the thing, is that it seems like, okay, it is a movie about a president who is a secret rage monster who is hooked on psychedelic secret pills that turn him into a creature who wants to destroy the government.
Just like Joe
And
Biden.
yet it has nothing to say about that. Right. Well, I think you mean Bo Biden, who is the dog who we should have left in office.
I think that the thing that was frustrating for me was just that, like, I love Captain America. I'm a very big Captain America fan in general. I think that actually this film not having something extra behind it, like just saying that the leader's part of a secret like, just do the remixy thing that the MCU tends to do, where it just kind of like shortcuts things together, which is totally fine as a way to like remix them, like the Ultimate Universe did once upon a time when it was new. But I think that what we're seeing with the MCU is it's kind of getting like the Ultimate Universe did after 20 years, which was like, oh shit, this kind of got complicated, and like you need to either care about a lot of the moving parts or really not care about a lot of the moving parts to try to have a good time.
Well, two
So,
things about that. One of them is, I mean, they're in the sophomore slump. They're trying to figure out a way to get back to matching Endgame, and they had to start off in the pandemic. And
mhm.
then, just as they were starting to ramp up again, they got hit by the dual strikes. So it's a hard environment to be producing genre
Anything.
films at the level they used to be doing them at. The other thing is, did you know I did an extended interview with Steve Englehart about Secret Empire?
No, I didn't.
Yeah,
Wait, did I? Maybe I
it's
read it
on
and I didn't
Newsarama.
realize it was you.
Well, we get deeply into like what he was thinking and the politics of the time and how he wrote Secret Empire and what his motives were. So if you want to get into that, I can send it to you and probably have some interesting
Great,
shit in there.
thanks. Yeah, I'll
And
definitely quote you in the thing that I'm
yeah,
writing.
and we'll create a little trail of scholarship here for this. I love the Secret Empire. The original Secret Empire is probably my favorite era of Cap, closely aligned with the Grunwald era, which is in its own way very repeating. It's a kind of repeating what was happening, but for the Reaganomics era rather than in the Nixon era.
Well, I think that that's the thing that's really interesting about Cap as it moves forward through time, is that I think when Englehart gets a hold of Cap, he's super boring. And it's not that he's like apolitical, it's just that like Steve Rogers is boring. Like
Yeah,
he's like a man at a time. He's like not interesting. He doesn't really he's not as like exciting as the X-Men, or actually the X-Men not even really exciting at the time that Englehart's Secret Empire is coming out, right? They haven't had their quite had their moment yet either. He's just not exciting. And the comics of the it's it's kind of similar to, I think the reason I was hoping for a Secret Empire moment from this Cap is that in a lot of ways I was seeing this era of the MCU as like 70s Marvel. And by that I mean 60s Marvel, everything's like big, flashy, new, right? You Spider-Man, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and you're like, holy shit, Stan and Jack can't miss, right? By the time you get to the 70s, we start to go in a different direction, and I really like Multiverse of Madness. I think it's good. I know that that's not a widely held opinion, but
I like it.
I like
I mean,
kind of
it's a
what it
pretty interesting
represents.
Sam Raimi movie.
Yeah, 100%. But I also kind of like the idea that like now we're doing this, like, instead of this big gigantic cosmic villain, we're doing sort of these more like stories of the self with like WandaVision and even Multiverse of Madness. And when you look at 70s Marvel is looking interior. It has a lot of interiority to it. Englehart, before he's on
Yeah.
Cap, is on Doctor Strange, and
Yep.
also those guys are doing a lot of acid. And so I was like, the thing about Cap is, and especially with Sam as Cap, I was like, there's a real, in this moment, cultural moment, is I was like, there's a real opportunity to explore that. And I had just rewatched Falcon and Winter Soldier the day of leading into uh, going to see the new Cap, and I was like, there's a lot of Gruenwaldy stuff all over that too. And I was like, man, there's like a giant swing to be taken in Brave New World. I hope they do it. And
I think they just
unfortunately,
took all the teeth out of it.
yeah, and that's what I was going to say. It's just pretty toothless. It doesn't have anything to say. It might have had something to say once. I think including Sabra really took things in a direction that they went, oh shit, we already did that, and we kind of can't walk it back that far because she's in too much of the movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, they started on the wrong foot with the New World Order title and
Yeah,
including Sabra, which, of course, if you know about that character, she's a nationalist. She's an Israeli nationalist superhero.
yeah,
She's like a part of
and
Mossad. And
specifically like a mutant, which is
yes, she
would
was
would
meant
have
to be a
been,
mutant.
yeah, which would be in this movie that introduces adamantium, uh, kind of a big deal, I
Yeah.
suppose, if
They
they
also
touched on it.
wasted D-Man. He was just a soldier who gets murdered. I'm
Yeah, it's
sad
a
about that.
bummer.
I'll be writing about that soon, actually.
They killed
Um,
another gay character.
without even making us know he was gay. And they turned him into a fucking soldier. Which they're all soldiers, they're all cops.
That's
That's what
fine.
the MCU is. They're super soldiers and super cops and shit. And if you don't like that and you can't get past that with superheroes, well then yeah, fuck the MCU, I guess. I mean, I'm already into superheroes to begin with, so I won't say that the MCU is like shining right now, but I think that it's got some interesting stuff coming up. I think that Thunderbolts looks pretty fun. I mean, the cast is pretty winning,
Hmm.
and Fantastic Four.
That's here's the thing. Fantastic Four, and there's a lot for me personally, like for my own personal mental health, riding on Superman and Fantastic Four.
Yes,
Like I
very
re-
much same. I said that to my boss the other day. That those exact words. My personal mental health has a lot invested in Superman and Fantastic Four being good specifically because I
yeah,
just look. Superman is the hero we really need right now, especially the classic Superman, who is a person who the understands how to wield power with compassion and with responsibility,
yeah,
a thing that is not existent in the real world. So it's the power fantasy that we should be looking at. I think Vince Gilligan, who created Breaking Bad and all that stuff, recently said something like we need to stop doing shows about villains. And I kind of agree because look, if you watch like Breaking Bad, which I think is a great show, and like Better Call Saul, its spinoff, and shows like that, The Sopranos in particular, they
mm,
all focus on like a bad guy doing whatever he has to do to get what he wants, and they frame the desires of that protagonist villain as a worthwhile endeavor. I mean, look at the Penguin. That was another great
true.
example of that, where he's an outright supervillain. Literally, it's even like there's no questioning that. They teach us. It's much like propaganda. It teaches us that a strong man is the most important person in his environment and that the ends justify the means. That a
Yeah,
strong man who has to go to incredible lengths to say, continue selling meth because he has cancer, uh, will be justified in doing so because he has a conviction in it, and it teaches us that might makes right. And I think that that is a lesson that too many people idolize rather than uh, really take a kernel of wisdom from.
yeah, and I think that the folks who have made Breaking Bad, who have made The Sopranos, would look at it and be like, "You're not," or even my favorite show is Mad Men, and
Yeah,
my favorite show of all time. I don't think at any point even John Hamm would say like Don Draper is somebody to aspire to. He's
right,
basically the
exactly.
villain of the show. He does fucked up, terrible things all the time. They're compelling, however, like the hero of that show is Peggy Olson. And even she's corrupted and does shitty things because of who her boss is, because she
Right.
idolizes him in the wrong way. And that's the kind of the. I don't think that all like media is supposed to moralize to us. By no means am I saying that, right? There could just be stories about bad shit, and we're reading Spawn, where sometimes just a story about bad things that happen, and in this case, there's a supernatural guy who's like pretty bad at having superpowers that sometimes deals with them and sometimes he doesn't. But like, so I'm not saying that like all media has to like reckon
No.
with its morals at all times. A story can just be a story about like bad shit happening.
Right. Well,
But
and it's compelling to explore that sometimes.
yeah, 100%. That said, I do wish sometimes that I think that we're unfortunately in an era of media literacy being at an all-time low.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that people have just been saying this for like decades and decades and decades, that whenever they're talking about it, media literacy is at an all-time
But
low,
it's
but it does feel
declining.
like it's getting worse. Where like people can't discern any, like people can't discern good and good and bad.
Well, and people rely on media to reflect reality to them in
Hmm.
such a specific way that, like, I mean, think of, okay, you and I probably had extremely different experiences of, say, the show Friends growing up.
Hated it.
And, oh, well, I hate it now. When I was a teenager, it was funny to me and aspirational.
Hmm.
And they lived in this massive apartment, and it seemed like that's what life was like for adults when I was like 14 or whatever,
Hmm.
you know. Um, and again, to me, that I thought reflected a version of reality that exists. To you, living in the world where that is set, you probably saw that and were like, this is bullshit.
Yeah, it was partly that, and also I just didn't understand what was funny about it, and because Seinfeld was the thing that felt weirdly more realistic.
Well, it is, and I liked Seinfeld too. And I mean, the at the time, especially, the humor of Seinfeld is more absurd.
Yeah.
It's not as based on relationships; it's based on the like foibles of the relationships. And we're really getting into a lot of fucking sitcom bullshit right now. But and my other point about it is with media. Well, my point is people at the time and still do look at media to reflect their life, and they look at media and expect that to be what it's going to be. We all have a friend somewhere who really thought growing up that they were going to have that sitcom life.
Yeah.
And when it comes to sitcoms, when it comes to, again, that strongman type of villain show, I don't, when I say it's like propaganda in a way, I don't think there's like a concerted effort by people in the media to go like, we need to push this agenda. I think that that is an easily compelling character, and that it is extremely self-propagandizing
Mm.
because of the way those shows work. And so when you watch a lot of them together, it makes people comfortable with the idea that a protagonist, the person who we should be rooting for, is someone who is willing to cross lines to get what they want because they have conviction that what they want is the right thing. And so
Yeah.
it trains us to see that strongman aesthetic as admirable. And that is something that fascism thrives on. So,
100%. And to bring it back to Captain America before eventually bringing it back to Spawn, I think that that's kind of the fault in that film, is that there's an opportunity for Harrison Ford's Thunderbolt Ross to be that strong man who fails, or who is upended by Sam Wilson's Captain America, by the idealist, by the like, okay, you're the might makes right guy. I'm the guy that wouldn't take the super soldier serum. Like,
right.
there's that scene where Bucky does say, I'm not spoiling this film because one, it'll be on VOD by the time this comes out, so I don't really care. Uh, Write us a letter, listeners, if you're mad about spoilers, or just like skip ahead. But you should know that if you only want to hear about Spawn, always skip like the first 20 minutes of our show. Um, uh,
5 to 20, it really
yeah,
depends.
when he comes in and he says like, you gave us something to aspire to. He's right. That's who Sam's supposed to be, but the movie never builds him up. And I would argue that the MCU in general has not really ever built Sam up to be that aspirational, because unfortunately, much like the real life Anthony Mackie, and some statements that he's made over time, he's just too much of like a centrist nothing. He doesn't really take a stand for anything. He kind of sells out Isaiah Bradley. Like he's like not, I don't know. There's a lot going on, but
Well,
like,
okay, so the politics of that film ultimately, to me, it starts out with the, like you said, the components of a compelling political thriller,
mhm,
especially with the idea that the president is being controlled by an outside interest with special pills that are influencing him into being more and more rageful. It's a compelling start. It feels like through rewrites and rewrites and reshoots, they
yeah,
stripped out the politics more and more until they had a political thriller with no politics in it. And
and
the
no thrills.
politics ultimately are, well, yeah, I mean, it didn't have a lot. The politics of it ultimately are bad guys always have something driving them to be bad, and we can always forgive them because they'll always ultimately do the right thing. And like the end of that movie where he's in jail, Thunderbolt Ross is in the raft, and Sam Wilson's like, it really helped that you stood up in front of America and took responsibility for your crimes. Everyone involved in that film, down to the key grip and the fucking caterer, thought that that was going to be playing very differently in 2025 America in a very different
Yeah.
environment. I thought they made that film under the assumption that many of us stupidly were, that a certain president would be actually a certain prisoner right now,
Yep.
and that anything would fucking matter at all in the world that has ever happened up to this point, except for like fucking Elon Musk owning an apartheid emerald mine.
Yeah.
Like, so they thought they would be living in that environment and making that movie in that environment. And at the end, the message is not supposed to be to us. At the end, the message is supposed to be to the shitheels to
Yeah.
say, stand up for yourselves and own up for your shit. And yeah, you'll end up in prison, but you'll have Captain America saluting you, and your
Yeah.
daughter, she'll fucking talk to you again because your family's been torn apart by your bullshit. And if you get over it and start living in human reality once again, Betty will call. That's what the message of that film is meant to be. But because it has no teeth
Yeah.
and they removed everything up to sending that message,
It's
it's
just
just
nothing.
landing to us. That said, I don't know how it's doing, how it ultimately will do in its run, but as we're recording, it's not breaking records, but it's breaking expectations and doing great at the box office. So maybe some fuckhead out there will see it and be like, I should own up for my bullshit, and Betty will call me and it'll be fine.
It
So I don't
makes
know.
me think that maybe Eternals was a masterpiece. So anyway,
Oh
speaking
boy,
of speaking of a military man,
that's
uh,
right.
who has become a superhero, much
That's
like
right.
Sam Wilson,
That's
one
right.
Al Simmons, one Lieutenant Al Simmons, is still dealing with the return of Billy Kincaid. And we're going to get into Spawn 85 and 86 today. 85 will see kind of the end of that. And 86 is a
Well,
bit of a
it's one of those
denouement.
issues where Spawn has gone through a big thing and now he has to have a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
That's kind of the formula that
And
we're
we
falling
are
into.
entering, we're about to enter an era where there's more than one. Curse of Spawn is ending or has ended around this time. Uh, and then Sam and Twitch will be starting up. So we're going to enter the first era of Spawn where there will be two books kind of happening at the same time that are actually set around the same time, that are like kind of in conversation with
Contemporary.
each other, rather than Curse of the Spawn, which was like, here's this thing that matters 80 issues ago. Here's this thing that maybe will matter in the future. Here's this other thing that is sideways to all of it. Um, the Spawniverse is expanding,
Yeah.
and it will be soon. So the way that we're going to get into that, to do a little bit of housekeeping, it's 85 and 86 now. Next week will be 87, and then a Curse of the Spawn issue, number number 26, and then 27 and 28, only because will be the episode after that, because it leads directly into Sam and Twitch. And I'm working on a guest for Sam and Twitch number 1. We're not going to cover all of Sam and Twitch, probably, but
We'll see.
unless you demand it, listeners.
We'll see what happens. I will say someone did demand Daring Escapes, and I
Yeah, that's
did get a
happening.
hard copy of it. It is sitting in my room right now. Also, Pierce, don't cut my rant earlier. Triple it, quadruple it, put it through a megaphone.
Great. So, you know what? Let's get into it. We've already talked about enough bullshit that's not Spawn.
Yes, let's get into
So,
some Spawn.
speaking of, we'll get out of MCU talk to get into Spawn number 85, Endgame. Plot by Brian Holguin and Todd McFarlane. Story by Brian Holguin. Penciler, Greg Capullo. Inker, Danny Miki. Copy editor and lettering, Tom Warzakowski. Colors by Dan Kemp and Brian Haberlin. Cover art by Greg Capullo, Danny Miki. Dedicated to Mike Myers, Austin Powers himself. Yeah,
Hell
baby.
yeah, because they were just selling those Awesome Powers toys.
Yep.
Shagadelic, baby. Yeah.
And we'll just do the summary from 84 just to catch everybody up with where we are. Twitch puzzles over the case of Billy Kincaid and forms a plan with Spawn to stop Kincaid from possessing innocent people, coercing them to perform unspeakable crimes, and then sentencing their souls to hell. Knowing his family is a target of Kincaid's, Twitch convinces Helen to take the kids away for a while. Later, his fears are confirmed when he and Sam receive a hit list with his family, the Fitzgeralds, and Granny Blake named.
All right. Well, we pick up in 85 with
some interesting narration that is in a
yes.
font we've not seen before.
It is. We pick up in 85 with this the cop that we just met in the restaurant, the bar where Sam and Twitch were hanging out, Rafferty, who tipped them off, who we learned quickly was actually the spirit of Kincaid possessing him. He's kind of walking the streets of New York in this very kind of Jack the Rippery, almost gaslightish, like silhouetted steam kind of vibe. He's like banging on the lamp posts and like there's steam rising from the sewers and stuff. It's very very like Victorian noirish, and I kind of like the vibes here. It's very almost Gotham by Gaslight a little bit.
Definitely. And the narration is in Billy Kincaid's voice where he's saying, let's get one thing straight. This is my story, not his. Now, a lot of this does read to me like John Leguizamo's Clown a little bit. It's not as like goofy and silly and funny.
Kincaid has almost taken the place of Clown, it's in a way, in this arc.
Yeah, it's a different rotund new narrator
with some very weird shit about him.
Yeah.
He says, what does he say here? He says, so maybe I had a thing about little kids. Big deal. Nobody's perfect. Yeah, man. Nobody's nerfic. That's right. Like, whoopsie doodle.
And but I like this. As we turn the page, it's this Rafferty with all these with the souls of everybody that Kincaid's convinced to kill behind him. And I like this big splash page, kind of canted angle.
Yeah. The double splash of him as a cop leading his like poor souls that he's all
does unfortunately hit different in like 2025 to have like the cop as your villain. But it works.
The cop will get redemption by the end. Don't you worry, Pierce.
Unfortunately,
the cop will be fine. Well, in a way, spiritually.
Yeah. They do go out of their way in this book to make sure we know that he was not on the job for very long. He was a good cop.
He's a good cop. He was a good cop. He was a good cop. So yeah, and Kincaid, as he's like leading the people through the streets, he's like, come on, kiddies, it's killing time. He's saying that each soul has a different taste, and some are cinnamony and others are tart, and everyone's a little different. Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, Spawn is watching him as he's walking through the streets with these lost souls, and he knows it. He feels Spawn's eyes on him, and we see Spawn lurking in the rooftops, following him as he goes.
And as he's doing that, Sam and Twitch are visiting Terry and Wanda, and they're basically like, Twitch is kind of begging them, like, please get out of town, like, please leave. Similar to what he said to his own wife, like, you might be in danger, so please listen to us. Terry catches on that this has something to do with Al, but Twitch is like, let's not alert Wanda. Let's like keep Al kind of not worrying about Wanda. Also, just let's do this. Like, trust us, please. And Wanda is more resistant, obviously, because unfortunately she doesn't get a lot of agency here. She kind of is just getting shuffled around. Kind of a bummer. This is kind of a thing that we've run into a bunch of times with Spawn, is that the men typically don't let her speak or do things.
Yeah, and she tells them, I'm not going anywhere until I know what this is all about. You're not even real cops. And that comes up again later, which, to be fair, they're not. But yeah, basically, as you said, Terry kind of is like, look, this has got something to do with Al, right? And Twitch confirms it. And that leads Terry to kind of cajole Wanda into getting out of the house
Yeah.
and going somewhere safe. They go to collect cyan, and she says, "I'm so cold, mommy. Why is it so cold?" And she's wrapped up in Al Simmons' flag
Hmm.
that she pulled out of the closet
Yeah,
in
she
the
still got the
last issue.
shoelace.
She still got the shoelace. And I will say, I thought this was going to get more of a payoff in this issue because it seemed to be connected to Kincaid because he visited and everything,
Yeah.
but not. Well, this is kind of just where it ends for Cyan in this chapter.
Yeah.
Um, Back in the alleys, Kincaid as Rafferty is calling out Spawn, and Spawn leaps into action. I love the panel of him at the bottom where he's saying Kincaid, and Cagliostro is reprimanding him. No, you're playing right into his hands. I love that panel. I love Spawn, the silhouette. Just a great action silhouette, very readable, and I think like the hand looks awesome. Our team killing it as usual. It's kind of business as usual so far. There's not anything super great, but this is a super good page. Well, I will say we kind of sold short the double page spread. That was really good. I liked
Hmm.
it pretty well.
Oh, there's a lot of times where we say like the book is just kind of moving, and like the book's kind of on rails right now. We have gotten introduced to Billy Kincaid. We know he's back. We know that Spawn and Cog kind of ended the last issue with like, now we know what we need to do, or like, are you ready to do what you need to do, kind of thing. So they seemingly have a plan. We're kind of seeing everything kind of fall into motion, and that's what these pages represent. We're going like 2 pages here, 2 pages here, 2 pages here. We're just kind of like hitting everything
All
that
the
we need to hit.
bits.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the little bits that have gone through the last few issues. Here's where they're getting tied into the last like kind of climax.
Yeah, and it's adding to the momentum of the story. I mean, you read these pages pretty quick. We said before we got on the mic, before we started recording, like, these are kind of breezy, which we say all the time, and then our episodes are 2 hours long. I understand. But these do kind of move in the sense that Rafferty's now in the alley. Spawn is engaging with him. They're doing their normal, like, oh, I'm going to send you back to hell. Oh, what are you going to do? Kill me twice. That didn't really work out the last time. Spawn makes a run for it. While that's happening, Sam and Twitch are, you know, trying to get back over to him as quickly as possible. This is where Twitch is looking through the files and he's like, Rafferty's a good man.
Yeah. Well, I like this bit of Rafferty in the alley where he's sitting in Spawn's throne
That's fun.
with the bone in
Kind of
his
menacing.
hand. I like the bottom of the page where Spawn is like, "It doesn't matter to me, Kincaid. One way or another, I'm going to send you back to hell where you belong." And Kincaid, these two panels where it's Rafferty's face turning into Kincaid's, and then the
Yeah.
close up on his face as Kincaid's, really cool to me. And then yeah, Spawn disappears, and yeah, we have Sam and Twitch literally careening towards the action in their car, and nothing more important or powerful in the universe of Spawn than a file, and in this case, it's a file which downright absolves the soul of one good cop. Twitch is basically reading it saying like, oh God, he's got a wife, he's got kids, he's a good cop.
He's barely been a cop.
Yes.
Important to note, he's not been a cop for very long. He hasn't had the chance to do anything wrong.
Well, and they are also saying how much they hate what's going to happen to him.
Yeah.
And that's kind of foreshadowing what's going to occur,
Right.
which is Spawn is going to lure Rafferty / Kincaid deeper and deeper into Rat City, into the alleys, until they get to where else? The Dead Zone.
Yeah, which we can really see from Spawn's cape. Spawn's cape is no
Yes.
longer huge. It's just draped over him the way that we've seen it drape before.
It kind of goes inert. That's like our visual cue here.
Yeah.
And so I like that this kind of foreshadows what's about to happen a little bit. Spawn says, "This is where it ends, Kincaid." And Kincaid says, "No, Spawn, this is where it begins." And that's what people are always seem to be saying to Spawn. It's like, "No, Spawn, you're not at the end. You're at the fucking beginning." And I mean, in a way, that's true because we're on issue 87 or 85 or 6.
85.
85. You know how You all know how I am with numbers and also speaking sometimes.
Yep.
uh 85 issues of 300, almost going on 400 now at this point, so we are really just at the beginning. But they square off. There's this cool panel of a double panel of them like face to face, like about to have a showdown. And then Kincaid, he says, Spawn says, "Give me your best, Billy boy, give me your best shot." And uh Billy Kincaid goes, "You got it, bud," and just shoots Spawn. Spawn falls over because, it's the dead zone. He's
Power's not
not as
working.
impervious. He's still got the body of a Hellspawn, but his suit isn't there to protect him.
Right.
And they tangle. Spawn holds Billy down and he says, "You get it, Billy? Now you're stuck inside that body because you don't have any power here." Basically, he has taken him into the dead zone and trapped him inside Rafferty's body. Now, all the night people who Spawn has rallied together are kind of circling up around them, kind of like
Like a
what is it?
schoolyard fight.
Yeah, exactly. Or a what's the website they put all the fights on? Fuck. Star.
World Star?
World Star. Yes, sorry, it's been years. They're circling up World Star style. And and Spawn is kind of just beating the crap out of him.
Yeah.
But Billy fights back and he's kind of taunting him. The night people are telling him, "Hang in there, come on, go Al." And this is very reminiscent. Actually, what this is really reminiscent of to me, even in the framing, is the end of Rocky Five, which is the one that everyone hates. It is sort of the one that was like the return of John G.
Oh
Avildsen,
yeah.
and he trains what's his name, Tommy Gunn, the Street Fighter, and then it ends with them having the street fight, and everybody's cheering on Rocky. It's a lot like that, but much like also in that movie, Kincaid starts to get the upper hand a little bit. Spawn body slams him. That shot is really cool. I love that panel of Spawn holding him up and then just like fully choke slamming him. But Kincaid sort of faints and makes it seem like he's abandoning the
The
body
body.
of the
Yeah.
cop. And Al/Spawn doesn't want to kill Rafferty if he doesn't have to. But fortunately, we'll see what happens next because uh, Rafferty/Kincaid starts taunting Spawn again, telling him, "You think I don't know about the dead zones? You think this wasn't planned? You think that everything that has happened isn't part of Hell's design? You're not here because of me, because of Hell. I'm not here because of you." Basically, just taunting him the same way Alan has been taunted so many times, saying, like, you're just playing into Spawn's hands. Everything you do is just taking you closer and closer to what Malbolgia wants.
I have a question. Does Kincaid give Rafferty's body some sort of like supernatural something? Like, because Spawn weighs 500 pounds. You
I mean,
can't
we'll have to
really
guess
like
so.
deck him, can you?
Well, he says in the thing, he says in the narration that the body is younger and faster and stronger, and that he's not afraid of hurting himself. So he's kind of just like throwing himself into this, knowing it's going to destroy this body, but not giving a shit. But
All
yeah, I
right.
mean, I would assume that it does have some. We can assume it does have some sort of supernatural connotation because
Okay.
he really is giving Spawn what for, wrapping Spawn's chain around his own neck, and also that's the degree of the power of the dead zone, maybe.
Yeah,
You know,
I guess. Maybe it affects him less or something.
so he has Spawn all wrapped up, the chains around his neck, and he starts taunting him again, saying, "I'm going to kill that detective and his wife and his kids, and maybe I'll get inside the body of Terry and use him to kill Wanda. Wouldn't that be crazy?" And he says, "Oh man, it's going to be sweet. 34 flavors of fun." And just as he says that, it's going to be bam. And then it says bang, and he says, "Bang, uh-oh." The like the Kincaid narration recognizing that the body's been shot
Yeah.
and he falls over dead.
In a familiar place too, right in the
Yes,
forehead.
right in the forehead, by none other than Twitch, our resident crackshot Deadeye. Because, as Twitch laments, he couldn't take the risk that he would actually find and kill his wife and kids, like he was saying, or that he would harm Terry and Wanda and Cyan. And he is absolutely heartbroken that he had to kill Rafferty, this
Yeah.
this this angel of a cop, this one good apple, unspoiling the bunch.
One thing that I'll give Holguin a lot of credit for, and it's something that I really like that Claremont tends to do too, is that we've only known quote unquote Rafferty for like 6 pages.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
total. He shows up as like a body possessed. It's not like we
It's
met him as like a normal guy. That's how Claremont would have done it. We would have met Rafferty like helping out Silbert, and he would have been super nice and given a donut to Sam, and then like
right.
he would show up as the possessed guy, and we'd be like, "Oh no, that's such a bummer. That guy was nice," and then he'd die here right after we found out he has like got like kids and stuff. This is the shorter version of that,
Right.
where what's important to Holguin and McFarlane is really to put Twitch through the ringer here. It's to
Yeah.
and we've been getting pages of that in past issues. Whenever like with Twitch having come back to life, but then telling his wife like, "Hey, it's not safe for you. I need you to go away," and she's like, "You don't trust me, and you're not telling me something." We see how much that hurts Twitch. For him
Yeah.
to do this also, it's really it's putting him on the back foot. And Sam was just put on the back foot after the Exterminator stuff with Sarah Frost. These two guys really get put through the ringer because of Spawn, and it's hard not to feel for them.
Well, and also with the scene where we met Rafferty in the end of the previous issue, they were just talking about how much they loved being cops, and Twitch is saying, "I miss it still. I sure do." And whatever we think about cops in the real world, and again, our politics on this should be obvious. Twitch and Sam have a particular reverence for that job. And I mean, theoretically, I do too. I mean, I almost, I don't know if I've talked about this in the podcast or not, but I went to school to be a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I thought would be a part of my life that I would do. I was radicalized against police by that schooling. But there is a reverence for the idea of what someone who serves and protects is supposed to be, that is very present in Twitch and Sam as people who believe, characters who believe strongly in this ideal. And so for Twitch to kill a cop who really didn't even do anything wrong as a cop, even
Right.
as the person he was, it's heartbreaking for him. And I mean, it's emotionally touching for us, like whatever, we've made the joke before about dead cops and stuff, but like Rafferty to Twitch especially was a person that he was kind of getting to know throughout this issue.
Yeah.
And to have to do that is rough. And
And he was seeing
especially
a lot of parallels to himself, He's seeing
exactly.
Rafferty in a lot of ways as a younger version of himself.
Exactly.
And it's funny that we started this episode by talking about Captain America because Captain America gets a bad rap because he works for he is the government, right? He wraps himself in a flag and that's his name, is this pretty fraught idea.
I think that's the stereotype. Continue your thought.
But the reason that we like him, and the reason that we like Commissioner Gordon, and the reason that we like Sam and Twitch is that like they are idealists, and that in a perfect world, idealists win out. And unfortunately, and idealists can win in fiction. Unfortunately,
Yes.
maybe that's the only place. But
Well, I hope not, but it takes a long time. We'll see. The thing about Captain America is I think the idea that he is like a soldier for the government, especially in like a gung ho, like I do what the president says guy, is almost the equivalent of people thinking that Superman is really
does the same
boring,
thing. Yeah.
boring and and uninteresting and unchallengeable or unhurtable or whatever. And that's just not true. And what makes him interesting is that that's not true, and the way that the characters go against that. Spawn is kind of similar in the same way, actually, where he's very iconoclastic against what he's supposed to be doing. There is this idealism that's laid out to him maybe idealism is not the right word, but there is a course of action that's laid out to him as Spawn that he's meant to be following. And the interesting parts of Spawn are the ways that he is iconoclastic to that
Mm-hmm.
and is resistant to that and is trying to be his own person and hold on to that shred of moral fiber in the same way. And that's a really interesting way that we connected Captain America and Spawn again just now for the sake of this podcast. But also, so they realized that despite having Kincaid inside of him, he was Rafferty was never corrupted. He doesn't have the mark of corruption. He's not
He's not.
branded.
Yeah, he's not damned to hell, basically.
Right,
And that's
exactly.
because Kincaid technically didn't have him do anything while, like, all the other possessions that we've seen, those characters have killed somebody
Right,
or done something
right. They've
previously, but Rafferty
yes,
was like pure, essentially.
and all cops go to heaven.
So
So
you know, Sam says like, "Hey, you saved him from damnation. He didn't get to do something that would have damned him to hell. Would have you know damned his soul to hell. Don't know if it makes you feel any better." And he says, "No, it doesn't." And he says, "Yeah, me neither." And we close with Twitch at home, and he's watching the History Channel, I suppose. No,
no, he's
or
watching
it's he's watching
Jeopardy.
Jeopardy. Excuse me. And he's
The question is, who's the most beautiful woman in the world in the story that of the Trojan War?
right.
So and he says Helen, who is Helen, which is of course his
His
wife's name,
wife, yeah.
Helen of Troy. And she gets home by surprise. He's sitting here in the dark because his wife and kids are away trying to be somewhere safe. They get home and he has this beautiful reunion with his kids and then with Helen. And he says, I did what I had to do. You understand? I'd rather lose my soul than lose you, baby. And she says, you're a good man, Twitch Williams. Remember that. You're a good man. And he says, I know, honey, and that's all I need to know. Okay. And it's just like really nice. It's a nice ending for him, especially after the horror of what he had to go through with the personal horror that he had to go through with Rafferty.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a nice little kind of epilogue for Twitch there. But that will bring us to Spawn number 86 because a big thing happened, which means Spawn has to have feelings about it. So
Which
we're going to get a whole issue of that.
Yes, there's the end of a arc essentially, and so Spawn has to go through a spiritual confrontation, which is the
Mhm.
way it always seems to go at this point.
Much like he did in 76 when he spoke with Granny Blake at the
Right.
cemetery, he's going to have a similar, actually a
Before that,
pretty similar events in this issue.
and before that, he went to another layer of hell. He
Mhm.
went to heaven. That
The
seems to
Green
be
Zone.
the way it exactly. Exactly. That seems to be the way it is. He has a big adventure. He has a spiritual movement that takes him another step forward. And in a way, he is progressing further along the wheel of the Dharmic wheel,
Mhm.
finding his true incarnation through these tribulations.
So,
Um,
Spawn number 86, Todd McFarlane and Image Comics present Abdication. Plot by Brian Holguin and Todd McFarlane. Story by Brian Holguin. Penciler Greg Capullo. Inker Danny Miki. Copy editor and lettering by Tom Warzakowski. Colors by Dan Kemp and Brian Haberlin. Cover art by Greg Capullo and Todd McFarlane. Dedicated to Brian Michael
Austin
Bendis.
Powers.
No.
Oh.
Some would say the Austin Powers of comics.
Yeah.
Brian Michael Bendis.
One of the only,
Nobody said that, by the way.
yeah, nobody says that. One of the only things that I ever got quoted on was the paperback, or not the trade paperback, the hardcover of Siege
Oh,
that he
wow.
wrote, the Marvel one. Yeah, by name too. And I have that signed by like everybody who worked on it, I think.
That's pretty cool.
Nice
I
little
have
keepsake.
never gotten named on a Marvel comic. And also Marvel kind of stopped doing pull quotes kind of like
Yeah,
right after Siege or so.
yeah.
And so I didn't get quoted on many Marvel books, if any, but I buy all the DC ones that I was quoted on, and that was always fun. So I have a few of those, like the
Yeah,
Flash and Superman and Action Comics, and
nice.
that's just a fun thing. That was a fun thing always to like tell my parents, like, look, I wrote this line. The most annoying thing in the world though is it would just say Newsarama, and then I think I've been with you and David while all three of us are like furiously Googling the quote with quotes around it, trying to find what
Figure which one of
review
us
it's
wrote
from.
it. Yeah, that's happened. Yes, yes, it has. Um, let's right off the bat. Let's go ahead and say, did you like this issue?
I'm pretty torn because I like I don't think I like very much of it. I think I like what it wants to do, and I think that I see what it's trying to do. However, I don't know if what it wants and what it's trying to do work that well for where we've gotten with the character to this point. Oh, that was a sentence. And by that I mean, yeah, well, how do you feel about it before I really dig into that further?
I kind of feel the same way as you. I like the literariness of it, and I like the way we'll get into what it is. I
Mhm.
like the way it balances like the symbolism of like a corpse and death and the body versus the spiritual uh, existence of a being, especially in the world of Spawn, where that's been a question before. There was that whole if you're Al Simmons, then who's in your grave? That
Right.
kind of thing. And we know that this version of Al has a new body. It's made of necroplasm. Uh, uh, so there are questions here. And it starts out with Spawn lamenting in his alley, saying worm food. In the end, that's all we amount to, isn't it? It doesn't matter if you're good or bad or just plain unlucky. In the end, you're just another slab of cold, dead meat, dead and gone, soon to be forgotten. One way or another, sooner or later, everything dies. Everything except me. And as he's giving this Spawn monologue, this Spawnologue, how has it taken so many episodes for us to hit on Spawnologue? Jesus
I don't
Christ.
know.
Wow. Um, oh, man, I feel like a whole new world of
Of Spawn
portmanteau.
portmanteaus.
Yeah, it's open up to us right now. So he's giving this monologue, and we're seeing these rats and flies and roaches and worms feasting on something. And as it gets to everything except me, it zooms out, and it is the sadly, horridly chewed up corpse of Rafferty.
They got to
This
work
is a
quick.
like this is a fucked up drawing too. It's
Yeah.
like they didn't spare any expense in making this a horrific image of a
Gets worse
like
too.
desiccated corpse. The rats are eating his guts. His eyes are all eaten out. There's shit coming out of his fucking mouth. He's just laying in the gutter. And yeah, as Spawn is sort of lamenting, everything I do is fucked up. Kincaid was right. Everything I do is just playing into hell's hands. And Cog is trying to tell him, you can't believe that. You have to not believe that. Keep the eye on the big picture. He's just looking at this fucking corpse of Rafferty. It's horrible.
My frustration with Spawn here is he's saying like, "Oh, everything I do only makes the devil stronger." Yeah, buddy, no shit. They told you that. They told you that in issue 1. Kill a bunch of guys. You're gonna make Malbolge's army stronger. Malbolge is gonna fight God. Malbolge is gonna take everything over. So for him to like, I understand that he's like in this moment where he's like frustrated, and so it's a moment of frustration. And oftentimes, when any of us are frustrated, we say things that don't make sense, or we question things that we already know. Cog here is like a little nicer to him than he typically is. Instead of being like, "You idiot, you don't realize what's going on," he's like, "No, man, like." It's just he wanted you to doubt yourself. Just keep on the path. We're fine.
Right.
And it does still feel like Cog is holding back. This issue, is going to also feel like Holguin is trying to parse some of the continuity that we've gotten before, and in I keep bringing up Claremont, but it's because I do feel that Holguin is coming from that sort of, okay, I have a bunch of loose threads, how do I tie them together type of storytelling that Claremont one of the all-time greats at it. I'm pretty biased. I'm a huge X-Men fan, but like that was somebody who, he is somebody who's able to say like editorial mandates kind of be damned. I'm going to write a good story even if I do have to do something I don't like to do. Holguin feels like he was given a bunch of pieces because I think a lot of McFarlane's early stories feel like pieces of something,
Right.
of not quite a whole. And he's trying to stitch them together into this sort of like Frankenstein of a story that has more meaning, that has more power to it. I think to this point he's done a decent job. Ethan Crone is just gone.
Yeah.
And that was one of the ways, like that was a character that was like allowing us to explore some of that like angry Claremontian narrator. I'm going to have this guy kind of commenting on stuff thing. That's completely gone. Having Kincaid be the point of view character last issue kind of allowed us to do the same thing where he gets to sort of berate Spawn a little bit, which might be a little bit of how Holguin feels about the character. I'm putting that out there as like that's how you could use that kind of device. Here, as he's lamenting things, some voice just says, "Look at you, goddamn pussy, pathetic," in normal speech bubbles. And as we
Yeah.
turn the page,
Well,
we get
I just want to say real quick
yeah.
before we move on, I just want to say about that. I think the lesson that we're as readers to take from this is Al Simmons is a man of action.
Mm,
And that is a thing that has transferred into Spawn as a creature, is that he is a being and a creature of action. And every time he decides, I'm not going to do fucking anything, he's forced into action, even when he
yeah.
doesn't want to be. And so, because he is a person for whom having a course of action and a way to affect the world around him is so important to Spawn, that when he stops doing anything, it bubbles up and comes to the surface. And then
Mhm.
when he tries to take action, he always tries to do the thing that he thinks Malbolgia won't expect, or
Mm.
that he thinks won't be, that he thinks will help, or whatever. And it always fucks up. And I think the lesson that he's not taking, the big lesson he's not taking, is that he's kind of addressing again here. Anything he does is playing into Malbolgia's hands, because being a person of action and a creature of action that takes the kind of action he does
Why he was recruited
is
in the first place.
exactly. So yeah, and speaking of which, like you said, this voice comes out of nowhere, insults him, and we turn the page, and who is it, Pierce?
It's Al Simmons.
It's Lieutenant Colonel Al Simmons.
Yeah, it is for all intents and purposes. It is Al Simmons who he does look different than we've seen him look before. Greg Capullo drawing him versus how Todd would draw Al in human form. It is different.
Which
But
is
he's
kind of good
all
because he looked a lot like Terry.
yeah, it's true. But he's all commandoed out. He looks cool as hell.
Kind of looks like the
Uh,
toy that would come out later.
Yeah, 100%. And Spawn's like, "You, who do you think you are?" He's like, "You know who I am." And Spawn smartly is like, "Is this one of Malbolgia's tricks?" And instead he just says like, "No, it's not a trick, believe me. Time we had a heart to heart, follow me." They go back to the cemetery, and he has Spawn dig back up the his grave, essentially his coffin.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, I already know, like I'm in there." And Al Simmons says to Spawn like, "No, I'm in there, you're not me."
Yeah. I love this panel on the page of their first confrontation that's right in the middle of their faces together.
Yeah, it's great.
And you
They
can
kind of
see
fit
that
together.
exactly. You can see how his lip and like his teeth, like he's jutting out his jaw the same way, but
Yeah.
his nose is like convex, like it's kind of fitting into the spot where Spawn's nose should be. So yeah, he kind of says like, "No, that's not your fucking grave. It's mine." And he's standing over Spawn, and he
Love
says,
that page. I
"Look,
love the colors around
yes,
him. I love the way he's sort of like highlighted, backlit by the moon. Huge
here's where the
moon.
brown actually works.
Yes. Love it.
The moon like rising in the background, yeah." And he says, "Look, it's time to bury the past, bud." The way he's calling him bud is very Todd McFarlane. "It's time to bury the past, bud." Sooner or later, everything dies, even me. And Spawn is like, this is a lie. It's a trick. And he says, oh, yeah? Then why are you shaking? You're scared of the truth, afraid of the real deal. That's why you let the old man boss you around so you don't have to feel responsible. Makes me sick to look at you. I was a proud man, a man of action, just as I said.
There it is.
But you, what a waste. And Spawn says, you don't understand. And here, Al Simmons just kind of castigates him. We get another couple splash pages showing the like people that have been the villains of Spawn, Tony Twist, the Cygor, Overkill,
Curse.
Curse, and we get like Freak and Billy Kincaid and the people Cyan, the lives that he's touched and the people that he's damaged and who have been traumatized and harmed because of contact with him. And he's saying, he says, being a good soldier isn't about doing what's easy, but there was a time when you knew that. And Spawn says, what do I do? And Al says, that's your problem. Maybe you can start by being your own man. Pick a side already, or hell, quit. Who says you have to play their reindeer games anyway? And he says, it's time to let go. And he says, what do I do what about Wanda? And he says, you still don't get it. Wanda was my woman, not yours. It's me she misses, bud. She dreams about me late at night when Terry comes home. And this is the heart of their confrontation. They start fighting, and Spawn eventually gains the upper hand, of course, because he's supernaturally powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And as he lays Terry low, I like this fight scene. It's really kinetic. You can really feel the emotion. Like Greg is really kind of selling the intimacy of the fight to
Yeah.
me.
I think the shadows too are like the inking's really great all around. The
Yeah.
fight's not just well choreographed, but it is the those kind of anchor images, as we've talked about anchor images before. I'm learning
Yes.
something.
Yes.
Uh, the anchor images are great across the board, but this is a pretty brutal fight. I love sad Spawn as he's like more and more covered in blood, and he
And
says,
like, yeah, Al's face is all fucked up.
yeah, and he says, I don't care who you are, whether you're some devil or some bad dream or the goddamn ghost of Christmas past. I'll make you sorry you were ever all. And Al says, go on, finish it, destroy me. And he kind of can't bring himself to do it because to destroy, even if this is some facsimile of Al Simmons, is to destroy something about himself. And listen, it's a comic book. You have to punch ideas of things in order to
Right.
sell 22 pages of a comic book. I totally understand that. This one, I don't know if this feels a little too heavy-handed. I don't know. How did you feel about this?
I actually liked it. I liked him fighting his old self because I mean that's what we've been seeing him doing this whole time for 86
Mm,
issues as of this. And seeing that brought tangibly to the page is interesting to me. I like the fight scene. I like how it ends. It ends with Spawn cradling Al in his arms and he says, I can't kill you. And Al says, don't you see? You have to. It's the only way for both of us. Lieutenant, that's an order. And we get this like silhouette of Spawn and his cape is going massive.
yeah,
And he clearly kills Al. And then we get this close up on the most dejected Spawn face we've ever had, where he says, forgive me. Rest easy, soldier. And his eyes are just like drooping. And then we get this killer splash page of him cradling Al Simmons'
so
body, going,
cool.
what have I done? And the
Great
lettering
lettering
is
too.
so great. This looks like a page out of an EC comic or
Hmm.
something to me.
The,
It just,
this is a gorgeously rendered issue across the
it
board.
is.
I think that I'm not. It's funny. We've made so much about like Todd maybe writing a lot of that purple prose. I'm kind of missing it here. I'm kind of wishing for a little bit of interiority here, or maybe even a little bit of the omniscient narrator to sort of give me something here, because I think that the only problem is that this issue just kind of picks up only a little bit after the last issue ends, right? And it just happens. It's not like Spawn goes to sleep. It's not like Spawn gets drugged. It's not like Spawn gets mystically warped into something. it just kind of gets dropped in front of us, and we're not. It's unsettling, and it's like, well, I'm not totally sure what I'm looking at here.
Right. Is it a ghost? Is it a facsimile, a revenant or something?
Right.
I think it's a psychological thing for Spawn. I think it's something that maybe this isn't even a fight he's actually physically having. Maybe he's running to the graveyard to see his own grave and he's having this sort of psychological
Hmm.
confrontation. There's a lot of room for interpretation with that. And I'll say that that can go either way. You can easily be into what you're seeing and into it just being open to interpretation and to just sort of read into Spawn and Al's emotions. Or it can be frustrating that, like you said, it doesn't follow a mechanic of like, well, now you're in the green space, now you're in heaven, now you're in hell. I think this is just Spawn having to wrestle with himself. And I think that I don't know if I miss the narration because I'm looking at this double page spread where all Spawn is saying, or these 2 pages rather, where all Spawn is saying is, "You were right. I'm sorry. Wherever you are, I hope you are at peace. God knows you've earned it. Goodbye."
Hmm.
And you see Al just kind of in the shadows saluting him. I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, this doesn't need more dialogue to sell me. I think though, to balance, to see, to maybe take a look at your overall criticism, it seems like what you're missing is the continuity of why the fuck this is actually just kind of happening right now.
Yeah, and I think that that's mostly what I'm missing, and I think even if I just had an omniscient narrator that was giving me a little something that, like, maybe Al doesn't get it or Spawn doesn't get it, like, maybe these characters don't get it, but something to show me, like, where to go, how to
We're
feel.
used to having those things spelled out in Spawn.
Yeah,
Where you, even when it's sometimes, and you know, that's the thing. Sometimes that shit winds up being a detriment later on or something that has to be written around because they come up with some
true.
continuity thing there. I think that you're right that it doesn't have the grounding that it needs. It kind of comes out of nowhere. And I like I said, I like the literariness of it. I like the feeling of it. I like what it's really saying and doing. But like you said, and I think you're right to point out that there's not much to ground us in the place and time of Spawn where this is happening or the why of it all, other than Al really questioning himself again and having to deal with basically the first thing he ever did as Spawn coming back to haunt him so sincerely, because that's really is the first thing he ever really did. His first big action was killing Billy Kincaid, and now he's finding out that since day one it's all been into Malbolge's plans, even the one thing he thought he got right. And so I think he's seeing he has to disconnect. But I think what it is on some level, and I've rambled enough maybe, but I think what it is maybe that this doesn't feel like the denouement to the Billy Kincaid story.
Mhm.
It feels like it would be happening after the like Jason Wynn story.
Yeah, and I think also it just I think the reason that it doesn't feel like a denouement for the Billy Kincaid story is that the Billy Kincaid story is not about Spawn like losing him. It's not about the struggle of Spawn versus Al Simmons.
Right,
I would say, right? Like I would
right,
say that, like you just said, Jason Wynn is the character that sort of represents that. Jason Wynn, he bucks against Jason Wynn because Jason Wynn wanted him to be something that he is not.
right,
And Malbolgia similarly wants Al Simmons to be something that Al Simmons is not in making him a Spawn.
right,
And so to have Billy Kincaid is a villain. Billy Kincaid is putting Al in a position to where he, you know, it, Billy Kincaid is an external threat. Billy Kincaid was an external threat in issue 5. Billy Kincaid, despite being a ghost, is an external threat here in this bunch of issues, I
yeah.
think. And Jason Wynn and Malbolgia are more internal threats for Spawn, for who he is as a person.
And Spawn having a reckoning after having this happen with Billy Kincaid makes sense. This being a moment of self searching or discovery for Al, or a turning point for him, makes sense. And this also makes sense, but I think it just doesn't feel quite right, quite like the ending of the Billy Kincaid story. It feels like just kind of a disconnected thing in a way.
Yeah.
What's happening next, though, is Spawn marching super confidently back into Rat City and telling everybody, get the fuck out of here. And I take what you want, but get the hell out, and I don't care what happens. We have this really sad moment with Bobby where Bobby is just looking so fucking dejected. He's been through so much in the last few
Yeah.
issues. He lost Bootsy. He almost died. He says, come
Again.
on, Al. Yeah. He says, where am I supposed to go? And Spawn says, that's not my problem. And Bobby says, come on, Al. It's me, Bobby. Just tell me what's going on. Okay, Al? And Spawn says, Al Simmons is dead. Never speak that name again. I'm Spawn. And you get this cool, like that panel of him being like, I'm Spawn, is like the opposite of his like sad puppy
Yeah.
dog face. It's like the most determined and gritty he's ever looked.
It's really the first time he claims that name for himself as well through these issues. Not the first time he's ever done it, right? He's definitely done it to be threatening and to sort of start to take some ownership of that. But
It's the
here,
first time he's ever said he's Spawn and not Al Simmons, I think.
yeah,
He's kind of said Al is dead, I'm Spawn, but this is where he's kind of like putting his ass into it. You know, he's acting on it by kicking everybody out, and he smashes up the joint with this huge wave of energy. And Cog is like, what are you doing? And he says, unhand me. You're in no position to demand anything. That bit from the beginning. Spawn says, from now on, the only rules will be mine. Cog says, what the hell do you think you're doing? And here's where we get that big ending where Spawn says, doing. Isn't it obvious? I quit. And it's just him in this huge conflagration of green fire.
yeah,
These last couple images, that close up on Spawn where he says, doing, isn't it obvious? And then when he says, I quit, that splash, killer.
yeah. Here's the problem that I have, and I think that this is also why this issue doesn't totally work for me. We've seen Spawn show back up in the alley, kick everybody out, decide he's doing something. Maybe he's not quitting. But when he first like delves deeper into the alleys and turns into a weird cocoon Spawn that everybody's worried about 40 issues ago, he does the same thing. And I think that it's not just the fact that this doesn't feel like a real sort of epilogue or to the Billy Kincaid story itself, that it feels disconnected. It's not just that. It's just that we've kind of seen this before. And I don't mind like a spiritual battle with an other, right? With an other self. It's something that we see all the time. And recently, I've been reading X-Men comics again, so I'm thinking specifically like Uncanny X-Men 233. Madeline Pryor has to face sort of the her reality, right? And there's that she's having that nightmare where Scott shows up and she's been abandoned already, and he picks off her eyes and he picks off her nose and he picks off her mouth and puts it on Jean and like rebuilds Jean,
Right.
and she says that the narration says that she's a nothing being in a nowhere place, abandoned and alone. And it's just like this moment that you're like, holy shit, like this is really somebody reckoning with who they are and their place in the world. Now, I'm not trying to say that Spawn is anything like Madeline Pryor as a character. That moment works really well in X-Men comics, though, because as a reader, we've already seen that those two characters kind of look the same. And it's the first time we're getting something, not that the idea of those characters looking similar has been put in front of us. It's put in front of us almost from the get-go, or from Madeline's first introduction. I guess what Al's dealing with, we've just kind of seen before, and it didn't end up going anywhere. He goes deeper into being a hellspawn the 40 issues ago, and he loses control of himself, and then he gets snapped back to regular-ish status
I
quo.
like this version of that confrontation, that
Hmm.
spiritual confrontation, better than some of the other ones we've gotten.
Hmm.
I think this one is more powerful and striking and more emotional. Like I was sold on the emotion of it, if
Hmm.
not the continuity. And I think you're right that I think what we've come to, and I think we'll both agree, uh, that this doesn't seem like the right epilogue to the Billy Kincaid story. but it's not necessarily a bad epilogue to a story or a
Sure.
bad version of this scene. It's just it's coming at a weird time. Now, knowing what we know about what's coming ahead in Spawn and what presumably they're knowing at this point or thinking about, it's not that weird for it to be coming right now. But it feels out of place.
It feels incongruous with the last 10 issues where we've really been like, stuff's happening. We're getting somewhere. Ooh, we got a villain back that we haven't seen in a while. We got Jason Wynn for a minute there as well. Like we're
Yeah,
we're we're building
we
for
were
Spawn to
cooking.
come back and just be like, fuck all of you, I quit. I understand that's supposed to get us to read the next issue and we're gonna do it. But it just, yeah, like we keep saying, it kind of came out of nowhere. But
Yep.
anyway, so that's been 2 issues of Spawn, and I have these 2 in front of me. And we're going to dig into some back matter. And the blah, blah, blahs are not super interesting. Terry Fitzgerald's just talking about the baseball tour. The tour of baseballs, where 22,000 people saw the display during a 3-game home stance, he
Wow.
says. But that's funny that only 22,000 people saw, because Dodger Stadium, I think, holds far more than that. So maybe people weren't that interested.
And just seeing a baseball.
Well, seeing 4 or 5 baseballs. So
Right.
the first letter says, Dear
That no one
Todd.
is throwing or playing
Yeah,
with.
they're just sitting there. The first letter says, Dear Todd, I'm in the Navy right now and I'm writing you from boot camp, which there's no way that's allowed. And I guess we'll get into that. I have some concerns and questions.
You
So
can
here we
write
go.
from boot camp, can't you? You can write letters.
Can you?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, why do most comic books show how comics are drawn as blue line pencils, full pencils, and inks to finish inks, but nothing about how the writing is done? Those of us who wish to be future writers would love to know. How do you take the writing and tell the penciler how to draw it unless you have a layout artist put in a basic format? I would also like to comment on the colors Dan Kemp, Brian Haberlin, and Dave Kemp. I think they're perfectionists and true artists. I actually picked up my first Spawn comics by stealing them from a toy store. They
Oh
were
yeah.
issues 11, 12, and 13. Ever since that day, I've been a loyal fan and paid for all my Spawn items. I love Spawn. I had my mother mail me a copy of issue 83. We're not allowed to read it, but I sneak anyway. It'll be hell to pay if they find out. In the beginning, it seemed Spawn was more of a superhero comic, but now it has grown into a full fledged horror comic. I admire your courage to address the issues you do in this book. I also commend you on the progress you've made going from just a comic to a soon to be all around household name. From the comic to movies to animation, music videos, CD covers, and internet sites, its divinity is unique but powerful. I'm a sucker for women just as Spawn was for Wanda. I make mistakes and learn from them. This book and your ideas have guided me in making my own comic. I will be out with it in the next 5 years. I thank you for creating such a masterpiece in fine art. Profoundly, Alan Moore. No, Darius Moore, Great Lakes, Illinois.
Now, this was
This is
299.
1999, baby.
I don't know that Darius was out in 5 years.
Nah, probably not. Probably not. Darius, I hope you made it home.
Yeah.
Um, Todd says, well, first Todd breaks down how comics are made, and I'm not going to do that. He says, I agree that Brian, Dan, and Dave have been doing an exceptional job coloring the book. They are sometimes overlooked when it comes to compliments, but the whole style of the book has been immensely improved since they came on board and helped take this book to another level. Weird shade to Steve Oliff and Oli Optics there, kind of.
I mean, you always look for the next thing, I guess.
True. Although I'm glad you're hooked as a Spawn fan, I can't really say that anything we do is wholly original. It's taking a bunch of composite ideas, putting them together, and presenting them in a way that is unique in terms of Spawn himself. The quest of keeping Spawn popular so that I can have some of my stories come true for years to come is actually the unfettered goal I've had since 1992. Glad we're still making inroads. So, there we go. He doesn't mention anything about him stealing Spawn comics, so
You just let that one go. Look, I'm just going to tell y'all, walk into any store you want and steal anything you can get your hands on. I don't care. Just don't steal off people's porches.
yep.
There's medicine in those.
The next letter says, Dear Todd, I've collected comics on a regular basis in many years. I haven't collected comics on a regular basis in many years for financial reasons, but when I saw the story about Spawn versus Al Simmons, had to check it out. Although, also, I'm one of those rare individuals who actually own the first few years of Spawn comics, so the return of Billy Kincaid was very eye catching. I love Brian Holguin's script over your plot, and Greg Capullo has been one of my favorite pencilers. By the way, when did you revamp the logo? Looks cool as hell. I don't really know how revamped it is, but
Mm,
whatever. I guess it looks different than the first ones because it's more like 3D now.
yeah.
I will be following the return of Billy Kincaid closely, the rebirth of Al Simmons even more closely. It is amazing to me you've managed to keep Spawn going for 7 years when so many of your peers simply give up a monthly title after only 1 year if they stay that long. I have a great deal of respect for your professionalism in an age when creators so often abandon the characters they launched that the fans love. Some shade at all the other image creators. I am always happy to see your title standing their ground in the top 10 sales against all the books of the big two publishers. I did want to respond, however, to some of the comments you made in a recent letter column. You mentioned that you and Brian are planning to, quote, deal with a few more social topics in Spawn and the second Spawn series. You also responded to another reader's letter with the statement, there is strength in numbers, and I believe the same could be true in terms of trying to change society's opinion of comic books. I belong to an APA called North Star, in which one of our members mentioned your ad for a talent search for new artists. What's an APA? I don't actually know. I am nowhere near ready for the big leagues, but since you are looking for new talent and are concerned about social issues, I have a question. North Star is an APA for gay comic fans. My question is, would you hire someone who is gay? If I or someone in my APA, is it an artist professional alliance?
I guess.
Maybe. Submit professional quality art to you. Will it matter if our submissions contain lesbian and gay superheroes? I still remember when you accepted ads for gay comics in an issue of Spawn, but I am concerned about those fans who are prejudiced, and I worry what their response to an openly gay comic creator might be. In a recent issue of Spawn, we saw Mark Lucas taking innocent lives, and it reminded me of the death of Matthew Shepard, the young man in Wyoming who was killed for being gay. I have always admired and been impressed by your constant attention to prejudice and intolerance in this letters column. I wanted to find out if you are open to submissions with lesbians and gays in them, and if those quote social topics you and Brian were going to be writing about might include gay bashing and homophobia. As you said, there is strength in numbers, and I just want to let you know that you also have lesbian and gay fans online who support your work and buy your comics. I belong to an online group called the Gay League of America, which has received 22,000 hits on the web. Uh, there were some fans in the GLA who warned me I would probably be ignored if I wrote this letter. You seem to be a person who cares about the hatred and violence in our society today. I really hope you and Brian are planning to write about social issues. You will not. I really hope since you and Brian are planning to write about social issues, you will not forget your lesbian and gay fans. Everyone at the GLA and North Star hopes and prays that someday comic companies will allow lesbians and gays to be heroes in their books. You were the first creator to feature an African American superhero in a monthly title and allow him to stay there, not cancel his series or kill him off. I would just like you to take a moment to think of the possibility of creating a lesbian or gay hero. If for no other reason, then it could be a very powerful story. If you've got superpowers, then why would you need to hide anything? Just a thought. In closing, I am really looking forward to seeing Al Simmons spawn, and thanks again for the story of Mark Lucas. In this day and age, when kids are killing kids, whites are killing blacks, and straights are killing gays, we need stories that humanize people and show the tragedy behind the violence. Thank you so much for listening. Sincerely, Ben Shapiro. No, Jericho Wilson, member of the Gay League of America, San Francisco, California. Woo!
Well, I just want to say,
By erasure first. Boy, oh boy.
yeah, they only got two of the letters in that one. No, I mean it's the '90s, you know. And I think it's amazing that this person was speaking out and that they had a group to go to.
Yeah.
Being a queer person in the '90s who really had no understanding of that and no way to get an understanding other than just like kind of absorbing any information I could find secretly about like what it meant. It's great that they had that. I also don't know that Todd McFarlane and Spawn are the outlet I'd be like asking, but I get it. I get it. And I think they're saying, you know, if you're going to be addressing this stuff, hey, how about a hand up for us, which, you know, I echo their sentiments in 2025. We need stories that are humanizing and not othering people.
Yeah, absolutely. So Todd responds just saying like, "Thanks for being on the Billy Kincaid train since the early days," which is again
Not
funny.
how
Just
I'd say it.
you know, that's not how I'd say it either. If I had thought about that for a second. Anyway, he says, as for social topics we'll be writing about, there's nothing we'll avoid as long as it's in good taste and the stories pay respect to whatever topics we choose. Let's look at your question on two levels. In terms of accepting artwork from somebody in the gay community, it's really irrelevant to the process. When I'm looking at art, and I believe it's true with any comic book company, we usually don't even ask what your education is or what your religious upbringing is. I like this says usually.
Yeah.
When do they? Or any of
Ooh.
those questions, let alone your sexual orientation. All we care about is, can you draw a damn good comic book? If the answer is yes, then you can. Then what you do in your spare time is up to you, as long as you can meet a deadline and draw, write, color good comic book pages. If you can do that, the editors be glad to keep pumping work your way. In terms of creating a book specifically aimed at lesbians or gays, if I understand your suggestion correctly, it's not something I'm really interested in. Similarly, I don't want to create a book aimed at doctors that only medical people would be interested in, or a sports book that only people who follow sports would read. My goal as a publisher is to try and come up with ideas that speak to people from all walks of life, whether you're a doctor, lawyer, gay, black, white, or whatever. What's important is that the story has some kind of meaning and punch. If your idea for a book could be produced in a way that wouldn't alienate those not from a certain sector, in this case, the heterosexual community, then the answer would be absolutely. Although Al Simmons is a black man and Spawn is very popular, the sad fact is there's a reason why he's burnt and wears a mask. I wanted to take away the one visible identifying feature so people could just accept him for who he is as a person and get beyond the tagline, oh, it's a black superhero. I just want him to be a cool superhero. As soon as you start doing things with labels on them, black, gay, etc., then I don't think you're accomplishing your goal, which is to reach as wide an audience as possible. The subject needs to be presented in a way so it's not an issue. So being gay is not an issue. Spawn's being black isn't something I harp on every single issue. He's a hero who happens to be black. If you could take that idea and make a cool and interesting hero who happens to be gay, then that story would be far more successful than one saying, here's a gay guy who happens to be a hero. I think the first example works far better. Good luck to you guys. I appreciate the support you've given me. Bye.
Lots of very 90s ideals in there about what it means to include or create a character that is about or that has those qualities of identity. Lots of very 90s, lots of very like, well, if we make a girl movie, the girls, only the girls will come kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
You
Like
know,
if you make a gay comic, only gay people want to read it. And it's like, well, that's ideally not not, hopefully they just happen to be gay, Todd.
I to his point a little bit, I do think that he's right in the sense that, and we've seen this happen, especially over the last 15 to 20 years, that whenever a company has come out and been like, and remember Bunker?
Yeah.
Right. And they were like, check it out, a gay teen titan. And everybody was like, so what else is cool about them? And they were like, it's a gay teen titan. And that's kind of what he's getting at, is like the character's better when it's just like, oh yeah, that Superboy is gay. And everybody's like,
Right.
we already liked him. Perfect. He's also gay. And then they were like, well, some of us are mad about that. And we were like, well, fuck you. It
Well,
doesn't really
fuck you.
matter.
Yeah.
Tim Drake's gay now, or he's bi. Um, by erasure, by me.
That's right.
Um, but like Tim Drake, you love Tim Drake. Yes, we love Tim Drake. Great character. He's so nuanced and cool. Yeah, great. Well, he happens to be bisexual. Okay, great. And I think that that's kind of what Todd's getting at, is like, I
For
just want
sure.
to tell a story with characters who their defining feature is not this part of their identity that is maybe, I don't want it to seem like a cash grab, I think is his point.
Well, sure. And I don't think that most people, especially now, most queer people, I can speak for myself anyway, we're not looking at stories that are like, by the way, here's Superman, but if it was written for the queers, like that's not really appealing to us. I'm not really looking for like, comics for her. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, or whatever the fuck. Like, I like comics that talk about those things, and I certainly like stories that tell those things from their own point of view. I like trans creators making trans comics and stuff like that, comics about trans characters. I think to Todd's other part of that point is maybe he's not the guy to do a story that is about very strongly about the identity of gay people, much like he's not the guy to do the story that is very strongly tied to having a black identity.
I mean, a thing that should be pointed out about Spawn is that it is largely a white guy writing about a character who's black, who just does not really dive into anything about his identity because he doesn't know anything about it. Like I'd say, like
We're
it's
not
a
getting very culturally specific things here. We're getting things that are very relatable to anyone who reads Spawn,
right.
which probably better that way in
Yeah,
this case.
yeah. Probably safest that he does it that way rather than potentially write something insensitive, which he's gotten pretty well. The KKK arc
When
gets
keeping it real goes wrong is what we'll call that.
yeah,
But also, I mean, not for nothing, Spawn is a comic where almost every month you're checking in with a black family and have multiple black characters
sure.
interacting with each other and doing things that aren't being gang members or getting shot or whatever, which again in the 90s was a rarity. We thought we were so far past all that shit.
And yeah, we still had Night Thrasher and Rage and
Yeah.
unfortunately
And
stereotypical characters.
and no one talks about fucking living single, and everybody talks about Friends.
To bring it back to Friends.
That's exactly right. Living single, far superior.
Oh yeah, that show's good.
Yeah, fucking
Uh
slaps.
issue 86, the blah blah blah, doesn't have anything super interesting. It's mostly about how the next Spawn animated video is coming out. It's called Spawn 3 The Ultimate Battle. That's just season 3 on VHS. But then we get one of my favorite types of letters that we get every so often. Dear Mr. McFarlane, I'm 13 years old and I'm a big fan of your fine work. I think your
Hell yeah.
drawings I think your drawings are the most detailed in any comic book. The reason I'm writing is because I think your comic book is not like some stupid Marvel comic books that there are now. Your story is real in a way, unlike Superman, who always saves the world and never loses. Spawn doesn't always win. He loses things, like his wife and his life. Well, now I have some questions about Spawn. Is Spawn caught between heaven and hell? Is heaven trying to help Spawn go to their side? I've been thinking about an issue I saw, issue number 10. I haven't seen inside the comic, but I've seen the cover, and I was wondering, who's that little guy next to Spawn? Also in the Spawn book, trade paperback, collecting issues 6 through 11, why doesn't it include issue 10? Didn't you like that issue? I was just wondering about that and needed to get it out of my head. I've got some questions about the Spawn movie. I can say the movie disappointed me for many reasons. First, I saw in the credits of the movie that you were one of the producers. Then I saw you didn't write the script. I said to myself, no wonder this movie disappointed me. I read your comic books because of the drawings, and especially because of the appealing story. I mean, not even Sam and Twitch came out or Billy Kincaid. That sucked about the movie. I saw the HBO cartoon, and that was a big improvement from the movie, but one thing bothered me: the strong adult content. My mom doesn't like me to see those kinds of things, so I had to turn around every time there's a scene like that. Other than Other than that part of the series, I loved it. Season 2 was even better, but too dark. Your line of toys is the best I've ever seen, the most realistic and most detailed. They're even better than Hasbro's Batman series and Toy Biz's X-Men. I only own one of your toys, Clown, and he looks exactly like John Leguizamo. What's more amazing about your toy line is you started in 1994 and you have thousands of different toys of just Spawn. Your toy line even has Metal Gear Solid, and I have to say that Solid Snake looks exactly like he does in the PlayStation game, which is not true because he's not made of pixels. But anyway, speaking of PlayStation,
Those Metal Gear Solid figures were cool.
they were
though.
cool, yeah. Speaking of PlayStation, I'm sorry to say it, but the Spawn game sucked. Sure, the artwork was great as always. Even Greg Capullo's artwork is cool, but the game sucked in many ways. I won't say in what way. I'm just saying it sucked. What I don't like to see with Spawn is its products failing. The toys are the best, but I'm talking about the PlayStation game and the movie. They sucked. Even if the movie was a blockbuster and made millions of dollars in the first day of release, I still didn't like it. Sorry. One thing I didn't hear about is the other game you had for the Super Nintendo. I had no clue it existed until I read about it in one of the letters when someone said he had it. Talking about letters, your answer in issue 76 was a long answer.
Dude, some of these letters are like people explaining their dreams.
It was a long answer. It took a whole page. My sisters don't like your concept of the story of Spawn. They think it's stupid.
So Todd McFarlane wrote a comic that only appeals to 13-year-old boys.
My sisters don't like your concept of the story of Spawn. They think it's stupid and has no reason to be in a comic book. My mom doesn't really mind, and neither does my dad. They both saw Spawn, the Spawn cartoon on HBO, and thanks to my parents, that's how I heard of Spawn and when I started to like Spawn. About your drawings, I think you do the best job on the hands. So do we.
Oh yeah,
You do them so
great hand
well.
stuff.
You do them so well in almost all your characters. I'm an artist and draw Spawn because he's my favorite hero, but the drawings take time. It takes me about a week to do one drawing, but you do many drawings in just 1 month. You and Greg Capullo do everything so lifelike. I think the baseballs you bought in the auction were a total waste of your millions.
Dude, this kid is just reading him for filth for his whole life. Here's every good decision I think you've ever made and every bad one. Signed a fucking 13-year-old. Imagine that's your job, is that you have to read every month, you have to read hundreds of letters about what a 13-year-old thinks you did wrong in the last month.
I heard you talk on the morning radio here in LA, and I was shocked you bought those baseballs. You could have saved many kids' lives in Africa or Guatemala.
Why does Batman not pay for the criminals' health insurance?
Or some other place in the world where there's suffering and starvation. That's sad. And if I had millions like you do, I would give some money to the people who are suffering. Oh well, it's your money, and I guess you can do whatever you want with it. I hope your Game Boy game of Spawn is good, not like the disappointing Sony PlayStation game.
My God.
Why not make a Spawn game for N64? That system has better graphics than the PlayStation. Don't make it for Sega yet. This concludes my letter. Hope to write to you in the future. One of many fans, Federico Mata, Van Nuys, California.
Dude, that was like an Alan Moore script page. Like the detail.
I'm not going to read Todd's entire review. It's basically a review of that letter. He basically just tries to answer all the kids' questions because Todd, I think, does really enjoy when like kids send a letter.
That's who he's making comics for, man. He's making comics for
He explains
Todd McFarlane at 13 years old. That's why Spawn's in it, because he created it when he was like 15 or whatever.
He explains how comics are made. He explains who Cerebus is. He explains why issue 10's not in the trade. He is sorry. He says, "I'm sorry to hear the movie was lacking some things you wanted to see. I can tell you that Sam and Twitch, who only made cameo in the appearance of the first film, will be major players in the sequel." Oh,
okay,
boy, it'll be coming out sometime next year.
Yep.
Nope. I'll keep you abreast
of
loved
updates. As we all know, we all saw it, you know?
Yep. And then he says, "I'm glad that your mom didn't let you watch some of that stuff, but one day you'll be able to see it. Sorry that the PlayStation game wasn't that good. Thanks for giving me insight that your sisters don't like Spawn, but it was never written for girls. Since they don't like Spawn, it means
I thought it was supposed to be written for everybody, Todd.
Since they don't like Spawn, it means we're doing our job right. Again, I'll pass your kind comments on to Greg Capullo about his artwork. Regarding my acquisition of the Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa baseballs, yes, the argument could have been made that my money could have been put to better use going to poor people. However, the baseballs were bought as a tool to create goodwill and raise money for charities such as the ALS Association fighting Lou Gehrig's disease. So far, we've raised tens of thousands of dollars for that cause. Although the money spent on the baseballs could have gone to benefit others, we're trying to do something good with the balls now. People shouldn't be forced to work hard for a living and save their money like I did and be bullied into spending their money on something considered to be a terrific cause. Everyone should have the freedom of choice, not only to purchase a comic book they like and the movies they wish to see, but also to spend their money the way they choose. The money you spend on video games, comic books, and movies could be better spent by saving it in an envelope and sending it to Africa or Guatemala, but you've decided you aren't going to do that. With that said, you must allow others to make their own choices too.
Okay, well, fuck you.
He got a little defensive.
I think Todd was getting a lot of that from a lot of people at this point. Like, you bought what with what and did what? And like, man, yeah, Todd's Canadian, but he's also an American.
Yeah. The last letter that I'll read is, "Dear Todd, I'm a 15-year-old from New York who puts a lot of time and money into Spawn. I have every issue, 1 through 80, almost all the figures, all the miniseries, every episode of the cartoon on tape with the movie, both games. The PlayStation version could have been better, and I'm a gold member of the club. Spawn is my favorite hero. Let me get to the point. I used to read a lot of Marvel and other comics, but everything started getting dumb. For the past few months, all I bought is Spawn, Crimson, and Battle Chasers.
Hell yeah.
I won't be buying bottle chasers for long.
Not for long.
When I buy Spawn, I'm not as excited as I used to be. It seems to be losing its magic. I was practically raised on Spawn, and none of my friends read it. I stuck with it, but the stories aren't really interesting anymore. I think there should be a drastic change in the storyline. Those were great moments when Spawn fought Angela, got a new costume, or teamed up with Tremor and fought Redeemer. I think he should meet up with Angela or Malbolgia again, or maybe get a new look. A good fight wouldn't hurt either. The cover for issue 77 was one of the most incredible pieces of art I've seen in a while. Anyway, I'll keep buying the comic and hopefully there'll be some improvement. Let's see the Fleabiax or Redeemer again. Thanks. Dennis C. Bourne, Queens, New York. Hell yeah. P.S. The Metal Gear Solid figures based on the best PlayStation game are really great. Congratulations on the Grammy nomination, too. Todd says, it's interesting to hear your comments on the comic book. You said you were raised on Spawn. Perhaps your fascination with the title is like a similar experience for all of us. When we're younger, we remember things for the first time that have a magical mystique, and as we get older, some of that magic goes away. Since Spawn has been around for 7 or 8 years, that would mean you were around 8 years old when you started following Spawn. Now that you're 15, I would assume you're getting to the point where most of our readers are. Where they just want a cool look to things. I will make sure we continue to put those things in there, and Brian continues to push, but not so much big superhero things or battles like Spawn had with Tremor or Redeemer. Those meetings are best left in books like Superman or Spider-Man. It's the bread and butter of those stories. Spawn needs to be somewhere beyond that level to give you a different perspective on what a so-called superhero book can be. Hope you hang around and have a good time.
Yep.
Poor guy. Honestly, that read like a letter. He's been beaten down by the 13-year-old in the previous letter, and he's like, I don't know, bud.
Yeah, man, he is he's as tired as I am after hearing a 13-year-old. Do you understand how exhausting it is to me to hear that much of a 13-year-old's inner fucking thoughts?
Since
Like,
I coach hockey, and that is what most conversations that I have with the kids that I coach, that's how they go. I was at an Islanders game, and like in between the game, like in between the periods, like the little kids come out and they play on the ice, which is cool because they're like 10, and the kid I'm sitting next to is like 10. And then I was like, oh, hey, like, look over there. That's Sparky. Sparky's the Islanders dragon mascot. I'm not going to get into it. And he looks at me. This kid looks at me and he goes, is Sparky the kid's coach? And I
hell
was
yeah, he
like,
is.
no. And then he goes, he goes, he goes, he goes, then why is he out there? And I was like, he's the mascot. And he goes, so, but he's a dragon. And I was like, yeah, you're understanding this doesn't make a lot of sense either, but I don't have any good answers for you. And that's kind of how Todd feels, I think, answering some of these letters where he's just like,
Oh
listen,
yeah.
I get that that you're getting this, and I get that it doesn't make a ton of sense, but I don't know what to tell you, buddy.
Yeah. I don't know, kid. Go ask fucking Greg Capullo.
Yeah. So,
Well, Pierce, I hope there are no other letters from
no,
15-year-olds to read this time.
not this time. I'll save
What
it
are
for
your
next time.
final thoughts on the issue? I think we summed it up pretty strongly there,
Yeah.
but
I think that issue 85 is a solid ending, and I like Twitch's kind of like, oh my God, I did something horrible, but he gets this nice moment with his family at the end. I think it feels really fast. It's like a really quick kind of resolution. But I guess we're running out of pages between now and 100, and we got something to do once we get there. So, there's maybe a little bit of, all right, this Billy Kincaid thing's been going on long enough. Let's get to the next thing. I think the fight with Al Simmons, I guess as we move forward, we'll see more of what that means. But I'm
yeah.
a little indifferent to it at this point. I think that if it's supposed to symbolize him finally losing the last shred of his humanity,
I would
so
like to see that followed through with.
yeah, exactly. So how about you?
Pretty much the same thing. I liked that. I think I felt the emotion of that last issue pretty strongly, but it really didn't feel quite like the right place and time for it. But that's how it goes sometimes. I think it's a pretty interesting issue, and I think the art was good, and I think it's a worthy issue, if not necessarily the most worthy ending to that particular story.
Word. Yeah, that makes sense. Before we go, what recommendations do you have for our listeners this
Pet a
week?
cat.
Pet a cat? Oh yeah, congrats on your new cat.
I got 2 cats. They're great. and one of them's big and one of them's small,
What's the best
and
way
I
to get
love them.
cats?
You
You got to
just
get
get
one
two of
big and
them.
one small.
Yeah. And they're very cute, and I'm teaching them about being on the bed and on the couch and stuff. And yeah, pet a cat. Or to make it more general, just find a way to feel the love you have for yourself reflected back at you.
But like not in a way where you might fight yourself reflected back at you at your own gravesite.
No. Well,
Mm,
if you can do that and it solves your trauma,
fair.
what else but ego death?
Yeah, I will. I feel like we recommend ego death quite a bit on this podcast.
That's
I'm gonna recommend a new record by a friend, Bartees Strange.
oh
His,
yeah,
uh,
great,
his
great musician.
his new record, Horror, is really really good. Cool, like emo punk R&B indie rock.
He's a fantastic
I
guitarist.
mean, yeah, just an incredible songwriter, incredible singer, incredible guitarist. Go listen to it. But at this point, it'll have been out for like a month. It's great. I've been listening to it a lot. If you really like the show, please rate, review, subscribe, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on all that stuff. You probably use some other podcatchers. Please, 5 stars goes a long way. What goes an even longer way? Tell a friend. If they just like comics podcasts, we're one of those. We talk about plenty of other comics that are not Spawn, but mostly Spawn.
Yeah. If they
And
want to learn about wet films.
yeah, we have some exciting stuff coming up as this year continues, and I'm really excited for it. Got lots of plans. You can find us on the internet at Spawnography Pod, on various social medias. If you have something to say to us specifically, you can leave comments on YouTube, or we respond to everything, or on Spotify. But you can also send us an email at spawnographypod@gmail.com. If there's somebody that you'd like to see on as a guest, if you want to be on as a guest, pitch yourself. We'll try and make time for you. If there's something you want to see us cover, please let us know, because we're trying to cover everything, but we're not quite covering everything. But we'll cover it if you want us to. That's why we're covering Daring Escapes at some point. That's pretty much it. George, for Todd So Loved the World,
He gave his only begotten spawn.
thanks so much for listening, Hellspawn. See you later.
Spawnography!